to start with, going to be talking about Everton. Now, the news that never seems to end, the Freaking Group have now pulled out of talks with Everton. Have you got an update on that for us, please, and the reasons for that decision?
Yeah, unfortunately for Everton, the Takeover saga that never wants to end has taken a new twist with the Freaking Group Takeover being pulled. Really now, the Freaking Group had been doing their due diligence on Everton's finances, but they have now decided to pull away from the deal due to sort of concerns over the debts that Everton have got, and that's probably been the main reason for them to pull out. They had reservations with regards to some of the outstanding loans, and some of those outstanding loans are due to 7-7 partners who we've talked about previously, about them funding the club to keep it going, and then the deal was never going to happen with them. So yeah, I think a lot of it's down to do with debts owed to lenders, and now the Freaking Group, who put in £200 million of their own money into the club to help for the funding of the new stadium and for operational costs as well. They're now going to be a new creditor as well because they've put that 200 million in, so they're going to be looking that back at some point, you would think. So yeah, real concerning times again for Everton. They're right back to square one, and now looking for other potential investors to try and save them and secure a takeover, because it's been really uncertain times for Everton over the last 12 months or more, and it just seems like when they make a bit of progress, something comes out of the blue, and they find themselves back at the drawing board, and that's where Farhad Moshiri finds himself right now as he looks to sell this 94% majority stake in the club. He's now looking at potential other investors, and yeah, as I said, Everton fans, things were looking positive earlier in the summer when it looked like the Freaking Group were going to take over. They were doing some early business in the transfer window, knocking back bids for the likes of Branthwaite as well. But now they find themselves scratching their heads and thinking, what's next for Everton? And looking from the outside, it's all a bit of a mess again.
Pete, picking up on that then, what does it mean for Dyche in terms of the sort of summer transfer plans from an incomings perspective? And could it hinder any of their potential targets if they were like chasing any targets?
Yeah, I don't think it'll have a massive effect, because I think the club were pretty much working on the sort of proviso that the takeover wouldn't happen in time anyway before the end of the transfer window. So they've been cracking on with what they're trying to do. Sean Dyche, as I said, he's done a few deals already, bringing in Tim Arugbenum from Villa as young midfielders. Other players have left, like Lewis Dobbin, and they fail now with Amadou Onana going to Aston Villa in that big money £50 million deal. That should be enough to keep them away from any PSR or FFP breaches as well. So that's the positive for the club. Obviously, Sean Dyche is working on other new signings. They're very close to signing the Napoli winger, Jesper Lindstrom. He's been on Merseyside for medical, so that move should be completed within the next few days as well, and that'll be another positive for Dyche. And I still think he's looking for another winger as well. We know there is long-term interest in Wilfred Gnonto at Leeds as well, but whether they could get to the asking price that Leeds are looking for Gnonto now, we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, I don't think it's going to have a massive effect, but long-term, as long as this takeover uncertainty continues, it means the club aren't really on a stable footing, and that's what Sean Dyche and everybody connected with Everton wants.
In terms of the suitors, Pete, to kind of wrap up on this particularly, are there any names that have been mentioned that could be in the frame potentially? And what sort of timeline are we talking for a potential takeover if it now is to happen?
No, there's no point guessing a timeline in this. We thought the previous ones were all going to happen as well, but they were all fell to the ground as well. So the latest interest seems to be an American consortium led by Kevin Malone, who is a former LA Dodgers general manager. He's been interested in Everton all along, but wasn't seen as one of the preferred bidders. But now he's back in the frame as well as the British firm Vici Private Finance. They're also interested in buying the club. I still think Everton are an attractive proposition if you can get them at the right price. It's just the debts is the major concern for any investor. I think the debts are of around £550 million. Now the Freaking Group, they're owed £200 million as well after what they've put into the club. So that's what's putting probably potential investors off. But yeah, moving to a new stadium next season, Sean Dyche does seem to have the club or the side on a stable footing, securing survival as well. So I do think they're an attractive proposition. So I'm sure there will be interested parties out there to try and buy Everton, and that'll be only good news for Everton fans.
Paul, if you're in their position now, what do you think about potential exits? If for stars at the club like Jared Branthwaite, could their heads be turned potentially by this news? Could it have a real negative effect on the squad?
Yeah, of course it can. Players that were looking to leave before not necessarily been allowed to leave because that you were expecting the financial input. It's just worrying for an Everton fan's point of view, isn't it? I mean, on the pitch, things are looking a little bit more stable with the survival last year. The 50 million coming in for Onana is huge. That gives them the opportunity to stay well clear of the FFP, PSR, and it might just give them the ability to rebuff a few more bids. But while the club ownership and while the finances at the club are still up in the air, it's not, nothing's ever clear. It's not easy being an Everton fan, is it? All of a sudden you think you've got around the corner, you think you've got new owners for the club, and then this happens. And the worrying thing from my point of view with the ownership is this is a company that have already put 200 million into the club, and they've walked away because they think the club's carrying too much debt and it's not an attractive proposition to buy when they're already that far deep into the club and in with the club. So others will look at that and go, well, if they're not investing, we're going to have to do our due diligence times tenfold. And what are other people going to find, and what are other people going to see in there behind the scenes, what's already put them off? So it's a difficult one for the ownership. It's going to rumble on. We thought we'd had it done. We thought it was the last time we talked about it on the pod. We thought that it was all going to be looking rosy for Everton next season. But it's going to go on for a long, long time. I don't think, like Pete said, it won't affect them in this window because they've cut the cloth accordingly already. And with Onana going, they've already got the budget sorted out. They know what they're working to. Should this drag on longer than January after Christmas into the start of next year, next calendar year, then they're going to be an interesting water again without any kind of clear ownership or funding going into the club. I don't see it being a problem for this window. Will they panic? Would they panic and sell Branthwaite when they hadn't planned to? I don't think they'd need to this window. I think Sean will do everything that he can probably to hold on to players like that. And then there's going to be a real question mark in January over these players again if the ownership isn't sorted out. As long as this ownership debate or lack of ownership debate and finances coming into the club, there's always going to be talk about players being sold and players having a certain value. Jordan Pickford, Jared Branthwaite, etc. Like the ownership problems, that's not going to go away. Does it affect the players? Yeah, absolutely it affects the players because they're going into another season having all the off-season problems exactly how they were. All the conversations are going to be about Everton off the field, not on the field. And it's sometimes difficult to play. I mean, a long time ago, I played in a Leeds United side that people remember with all the financial problems that they had. And that was a time before the windows were so strategic as they were. You were turning up to training each day, not knowing who was going to be in the dressing room or who'd been sold to solve financial problems. You're having to defer wages, etc. Everton are nowhere near that yet. But again, it's a conversation further down the line. How long is this going to go on? Who's going to keep pumping the money in to fund the club? Long term, short term, I don't think there's an issue. Get through this window. They've like I say, they've cut the cloth accordingly. That the players, the incomings and outgoings will be as they planned for. But should this drag on any longer, we're starting to open up other conversations again, aren't we?
What about from a relegation point of view, Paul, if we wrap up on this, where do you stand from that front? And could actually, given the scenario they're in, could they really be a candidate now for relegation? Actually, do you think Sean will have enough to keep the team up?
I think they've got enough. I always thought they had enough last season. And you look at the teams that have come up this season, that they're going to have, it's going to be tough for them to stay in the Premier League. Leicester, we know that they've got the FFP, the PSR hearings as well. We're waiting to hear a potential points deduction for them. So they're going to be starting, pushing water up a hill already before the season started. Southampton, it's going to be difficult for them. I think Everton have got a good enough squad. Onana's gone. We know that. We know there's going to be a couple more incomings. But you look at the points deduction they had last year. You look at the togetherness of the team. You look at the way that the team played. Not always pretty. It wasn't always a pretty watch. I was at Goodison a few times last season. And they were a tough watch, but they got the results and they got the points that they needed. I've got no doubt about them staying in the Premier League this season if things off the pitch are sorted out quick enough to allow the manager to do his job.
You've just watched a segment from Football Insider's brand new podcast, The Inside Track, with me, Lewis Pearce, alongside the guests on the show. Thanks very much for tuning in. Please do give the video a like, comment your thoughts on the topic, and feel free to share on your social media pages. If you want to listen to the full podcast episode, click the link in the description below. Keep your eyes peeled for plenty more content and exclusives here on The Inside Track.